Today we're at the home of Helen Klaiman, a survivor of the war, who immigrated to Canada shortly after the war and was born in Ozarow and survived the war there. Helen, can you tell me a little bit about the town and what it was like growing up there?
It was a happy place to grow up. To me, because I was born there, I think it was very, very nice. We had some very nice streets, a lot of stores. On Tuesday, it was a market. People came in the market and they sold some stuff. We had a beautiful, beautiful shoe. Besmedrish, that means we went to prayer too. There's some little stiebler that it was in the houses. A lot of rabbis there. I remember when the rabbi passed away, Rabbi Rabrivalo, Riven. So, but he passed away in the war. The war changed a lot for us. We were like the ghetto. We couldn't go out. We were working for the Germans. We worked on the roads. They took us wherever they could to use us, but we should work a lot. They took us on a bus to not far from our hometown. It was about 18 kilometers. To Annopolubelski, there was a mine. We worked in the mines. It was heartbreaking. They shot a lot of people at Ozarow, which I remember. Then we went took us out from the houses, quite a lot of people, and they took us to Skarżysko. Skarżysko, we worked at the ammunition factory. You wanted to know more from home, I think.
About your life there and about the people there, then I'd like you to tell me about my families after that.
After,
yeah,
tell you now.
yes.
We had good neighbors. Our home was surrounded with relatives and neighbors. We had also a family which they had a bakery. His name was Joina, and his wife's name was Reisel. They had they had 4 sons. One, the oldest, was Beirish, which he went to Canada before the war. His brother was Haskell. He was married and had 2 children in Ozarow. He lived in Ozarow. Then they had also a daughter, Malo. She was married. She had a little boy, which I remember the circumcision from that little boy. I myself was very young. Then he has also a brother. Moishe.
This was a stepbrother.
To me,
Yeah.
didn't
One
know
family,
stepfather,
yes.
not stepmother, because I didn't know nobody else as Reisel. And then he had a sister, Chayalo. Very, very quiet, a very nice girl. But the younger brother after Chayalo was Avrumalo. We used to call him Vrumche. He was a very, very lively boy. Very lively. Then they had also Dobrish. She was the same age as my sister was. They were friends. They went together. They danced. It came Friday night. They came to our place, and they danced the whole evening. They were happy. We were really happy.
What happened to them? What happened to them?
Then he had another sister, Frada. She was also the same age as my other sister. So they went together, they enjoyed together. What happened to them? Because they took me away to Skarżysko, and they remained in Ozarow. They went together with everybody, every Jewish people from Toronto.
From Ozarow.
From Ozarow. We were very happy. We didn't have the luxuries that we have here, but still, it was very good for us.
Well, the oldest son was my father. He came to Canada in 1930 and arrived in October, I believe, and on December 25th was married to my mother, who he was previously engaged to in Ozarow, but the wedding was postponed until they were both in Canada. My father told me he was a Moishe Chassid, and was a follower of the Moishe rabbi,
right,
who actually came to visit our home in 1942 and stayed there for 2 or 3 days. This was at the same time, during the same visit to Canada, he stayed in Toronto for a while, and I got to meet this rabbi, and I was quite impressed with him, with the black stromo, the long black coat, the white stockings, the payas, and we have a picture of him that my father had, and I have a record that the rabbi made because he played the violin and wrote religious music. And also I have books from him. And which, I'm sorry?
Can I mix in?
Sure.
They were Moishe Chassidim. All, we used to call them the Shpivokis. Why is Shpivokis? Śpiewać is, as in Polish, singing. They were always singing nice neginem. That means religious songs. That was Joinebecke's family. He had quite a few brothers. They had only one sister, Rivka, which she was married to Moishe, to a Moishe, I don't know. The second name, I don't know.
Well, one of the brothers had a daughter, Hadja, who immigrated to Paris, France, and was married to a Melman.
Yeah.
And her son and daughter are still living in Paris.
Yeah.
And a grandson lives in New York City, who I have contact with and try to visit when I go to New York. I have a picture that was sent to me by Henri Adler from Paris, France, who wrote the book on Ozarow. That was taken in 1935. It was a school picture with my father's youngest sister. The name? No, Dobrish. And I have her picture.
Was a lively girl.
I'll show it to you after.
And I know the name of your father's brother, which the daughter was in France, Hamaye. And he was so nice. The whole city, it wasn't even a little child that shouldn't know Hamaye. He knew everything, what happened to everybody. He went to the, what's it called, like here?
The registry office.
The registry office. His cop was for everybody. Everybody knew Hamaye. They used to call him Hamayehu.
You know why they called him that? I recall my father mentioning that, but I could never find out why they called him that.
I don't No. But we always knew it's Hamayim.
Did you know my mother's family?
No.
My grandfather passed away in 1932 in April. I was born in June, and I'm named after him. And his name was Moishe Safir.
Moishe Shafir.
He was the Moishe L'Shamus.
Moishe L'Shamus.
He was the Shamus in the
This
shul.
is your wife's.
No, this was my mother's father.
Moishe L'Shamus,
Yes.
a tall guy.
Yes.
Sure, I knew him.
And when he died, and my mother left for Canada in 1928, I guess my mother left for Canada before he died, but when my mother left for Canada, her brother Herschel came into the bakery and was running the bakery. My mother had two brothers in New York and a sister in Hamilton who actually sponsored her and brought her over to Canada. And this grandfather we do have a picture of, but
Sure.
my other grandfather I have no
Moshe-
pictures.
This we knew that Moishe L'Shamus' daughter, Moishe L'Shamus was a Mechitten. Actually, it's a
Joina Becker.
Zione Becker. This I knew, but I didn't I mixed up with Reisel, this grandmother. So that's why I don't, but it was nice.
How many Jewish families, or what was the population of Ozarow in the
Must have
early
been
30s?
800 families.
So roughly, what, 4,000 people?
Something like that.
I understand that the city itself was mainly populated by Jewish people.
There weren't, across us was a neighbor, not Jewish, Zelinsky. Some in the other streets. I don't think so if there were 10 Gentiles.
Well, most of the
Most of it was Jewish.
the Polish people lived outside the city
Right,
and were farmers.
yes. We ourselves we went to take the milk from the cows. So we had to go out of town.
What did your family do there? What kind of business were they in?
When my father died, an appendix. He had the appendix busted,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't time to take him nowhere because we didn't have a hospital. We just had a couple doctors, just two doctors, Dr. Bobrove, Dr. Best. Matter of fact, the Dr. Best lived not far from us, across the road where the police station was. So he lived upstairs. So it wasn't for my time, because for my time I remember those doctors.
But what did he do there
But
for a living?
What they do for a living?
Yes.
When my father passed away, what shall I say? He dealt with some goods. My mother couldn't do that. So my mother we were four children. So she went and bought some milk by the Gentiles and sold it to the people in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And then we made milk, like a little
Dairy.
like a little dairy.
Mm-hmm.
Butter, milk, cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also dealt with eggs. We bought the eggs at the stores, little stores, or we bought on Tuesday. The Gentile came to the city
To the market.
So they brought eggs. We bought eggs not by the dozen, because a dozen is 12, but we buy it by the kopa. Kopa, that means 60. I don't know how.
5 dozen.
What would be in English?
5 dozen. 60
No,
dozen.
it has a name. It has a name for this too. So then we packed those, made boxes, and we pack those and send to Warsaw. Or in the summer, we bought eggs and put them in basement. Was a little tent there, a special tent. And when my father was alive, he built that. So you had to put water in something what you put on the walls, white thing, and put it in that water, and that stays till winter. We put the eggs, and it stays till the winter. And in the winter, we took this out before Christmas, took out little by little, and we sent it to Warsaw.
My mother's family, did you know her brother Harshal?
It rings the bell.
Yeah. And she also had some sisters there.
Yeah.
Devorah?
But I wouldn't remember the name, because we lived here by your father's father, and they were.
You lived close to the shul.
We lived close to
Yeah,
the shul.
because my father told me that he lived just a block or two away from the shul.
What shall I tell you? The shul was here. We lived here. Your father lived here.
Do you remember the name of the street?
Of his street, no. I remember our street. We never paid attention
Yeah.
to
What
this.
was the name of your street?
Ulica Lubelska,
And what was the number?
number 2.
Number 2, because you know that I'm going to Ozarow for the dedication of the work that's been done at the restoration project of the cemetery. And
It was a lively city, very lively.
I understand that in the mid-30s, there were a number of organizations there
A lot.
that were dedicated to getting the young people to Israel.
To kibbutzim. My uncles were in the kibbutzim.
In Ozarow. In Ozarow.
In Oshlev. In Oshlev, my mother used to see my uncle, my father's brother, stay in chop the wood. If you wanted to buy wood, you had to buy not by the Jewish people that had trees, but they came on the market and we bought the wood. The wood has to be chopped to make the oven, to make the stove. It's no electricity. We had electricity later. In the late 30s, we had electricity, but not a stove.
Did you have telephones?
No.
No telephones.
No. If we wanted when they taught us in school, they want to teach us how the telephone works. So each class, they took to the post office to show how a telephone works, or to the police station, just to teach us. But no telephones, no houses was telephones. But organizations, the Jewish organizations was a lot. Shalom Halumi, Shalom Kadati, Shalom Hatziyonim, what's it called, the Agida, Mizrahi, Moishe, your brother, he belonged to the Mizrahi.
My uncle. My father's brother.
Father's brother. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but none of them got out of Poland. No, none of them went to Israel.
No.
The only one in my mother's side, excuse me, was her nephew, Harshal's son.
What's the name?
His name was Aryeh. And when he got out to Israel, I believe on the last boat out of Poland in 1939, and when he got to Israel, they modified their name from Schaefer to Sapir.
I know. A young guy. He was in the same age as your uncle.
And he came to visit us in Canada, but he's now passed on. But his wife still lives there, and we keep in touch with her. And their son was just here. visiting us with his wife and 2 boys. And we've been to Israel several times to see them. And their son, Dorrance, up here, is now deputy mayor of Tel Aviv. And
I saw him in Israel. I saw him in Israel because he came to my uncle to see me because they're here. I'm from Moishe, and especially my uncle. There in the book that both brothers, David and Yisrael, were tucked in Hillel Adler about the book.
well, my wife and I were in Paris, France, I guess it's almost 30 years ago, visiting some relatives there. And when they heard that Barish Goldblum's son was in town, the whole Ozarow society came out. The house was packed. And I met Hillel Adler, and I met some other relatives, Zuckerman family. And one of the Zuckerman family, until I see him, I won't know whether it was the one I met, Henri Zuckerman from Paris, France. He and his wife are planning to be in Ozarow for the 15th of October for the dedication ceremony at the cemetery. And I don't know if you know all that's been done, but the first part of the project was to clean up the debris and the fallen branches and trees in the cemetery, and to straighten out some of the mitzvahs or stones. And originally there were 100 stones that could be seen, which they photographed and recorded and translated the Hebrew writing on it into English. And not having any last names or family names on the stone, all you have is so-and-so, the son of...
The son of so-and-so.
Yes. And
yeah.
some have been, the names have been determined, the family names. But in cleaning up the cemetery, they found 200 more stones that were either half buried on the ground or just lying on the ground underneath everything. These have now all been put back on their bases, because when they fell over, they fell beside the base and cemented or mounted in place. And they will also be recorded and translated. So we will have 300 stones that are recorded. A number of the stones, approximately 20, were taken away by the Nazis for fortification not too far from Ozarow. And I understand there were some problems getting them back, but the Polish mayor of Ozarow was contacted, and somehow he was able to make arrangements, and those stones are either on their way back to Ozarow or are now back in Ozarow, and will be used somehow on the cemetery. As well, on the cemetery, there's a mass grave of over 100 people that the Nazis killed and buried, and our plan is to build a monument or a mitzvah for these people, and possibly the stones that were taken away could be incorporated into that mitzvah.
When did they do it? When did they kill 100 people and bury them on the cemetery? When did they do it?
During the war. I won't know until I get there.
September 1942, the 4th of September, they took us away from home, and the rest people, a lot of them, they stayed, of course, and they took us to Skarzhevsk to work. Then we had letters from our homes, from our parents, for my mother, for my parents, because the Gentile people, they went back and forth, and we worked with them in Skarzhevsk in the ammunition factory, so they brought us the news. They didn't write that they shoot so many people, except if they did it when they evacuate Ozarow. This I don't know.
Well, I have a printout from my computer on Treblinka, and there are a number of cities listed, quite a few, of when the people were taken from the ghettos or from the cities to Treblinka. Ozarow's listed as the end of October. And in the book that Henri Adler of France wrote, there is a picture, which most of us have copies here, and the memorial date on that picture is October 22nd, 1942.
I figured when I came to Skaržisk, they took us out from home. So many weeks later, it was in Yiddish. I keep the Yiddish, wherever it is. 8 days of Cheshvan. This is the original, a day after they took them out from Auschwitz. 8, maybe it comes out 24th of October, 25th of October, but I'm keeping the Yuetzat from 8 days of Cheshvan.
When they took you to this town where the munitions factory was that you worked in, did you stay there to the end of the war, or did they take you to a concentration camp after that?
I stayed till 44 in August, beginning of August. Matter of fact, that was Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, they took us from Skaržisk, they took us to Częstochow. In Częstochow, we stayed till the 16th of January, when the Russian came into Częstochow. But they still managed to take us out from Częstochow and took us to Bergen-Belsen.
How did they transport you, in trucks, or were you forced to walk when you left Ozarow to go to these other towns?
When we left, they took us to Yashitz. Yashitz, that was the 7 kilometers or 7 miles, must be 7 miles to the train station.
And you walked?
We walked, but they came in the middle. Under the city there was an empty field. In October, the field was clean. They took off the weed. So they put us out to stay still, and they walked around, and they picked. You go here, you go there, you go here, you go there. So one side, they told them, not us, I was dressed. The side here was dressed. They didn't ask to take off the clothes. The other side, they asked to take off the clothes. They're bare naked. And then they say, go home. Go home. So they ran. They ran, and the SS stayed with the rifles and shot them. How many arrived home? I don't know. And with us, they put us in this train station, and we put us under the train and took us to Skaržisk.
I understand that in 1939, at the start of the war, there were approximately 4,500 Jewish people in Ozarow. And Ozarow, the whole town became a ghetto, and they brought Jewish people from other cities, and it raised the population, the Jewish population, to 8,000.
Yeah.
And
it's true, because they came from a lot of cities. They ran away from Lodz, from Benji. From one city came a lady with 4 children. She had only one leg, walked on one leg. And so she brought in a piece of wood and wanted to use our stove to cook something. But this woman was so lively. She says, I haven't got nothing, but I'm happy.
The people that came to Ozarow from the other cities, they came on their own, or the Germans brought them?
No.
Or both?
They came on their own.
On their own?
Yeah, from one city, Germans took them out and brought them. How they came, with what they came, to walk or bus or anything, I don't know.
Did they bomb Ozarow at all?
Yes.
And
A
was
lady, not far from your
Which grandfather?
From
From
your
Yoina?
grandfather, yeah, from your wife's family
Oh.
there. Not far from them. It was a brina, how do you make say a brina?
A well.
A well. And they have to work like
My
this.
mother told me that right outside front door
Who told?
was a brina, my mother.
Yeah, it
And
was
in the book on Ozarow, Henri Adler put my grandfather's name in there. Although he printed the book or wrote the book in the 1990s, he put them in and put in my grandfather's name and my father's name and showed the number for the house that they were living in. And when I wrote him and said that my grandfather, my mother's father, had passed away in 1932, and yet the book said that these people were living there in 1939, and his reply to me was that he took some liberties, he did it for me. He wanted to show where my mother's father lived.
Yeah.
And outside the house, on the outline of the street, is a symbol for a well, or as you call it in Jewish, a brina.
Right. And the lady and a man, they had a wagon with something, they had the water and brought water to the houses. He sold the water. We have to pay for each pail. So they were standing by the well, and they worked with the well, they worked the water, so they threw up out. Right in the corner, by your relatives there, a lady got killed.
This was not a bomb from an airplane. It was
Of course
from an airplane. Yeah. I understand that the shul was bombed, and that the no.
The shul wasn't bombed. The shul wasn't bombed. The Beis Medrash, they took apart
You're in Kodesh.
everything, the whole thing, the whole building. They took apart. The Germans.
Germans took
not
it.
the Poles. Not the Poles. This the Germans did. But the Germans took in. What did they do to the shul? They put some people into the shul. Then they put some horses into the shul. It was a beautiful shul. Really a beautiful shul.
And it's now a plumbing supply warehouse.
Now here it's a plumbing. Because a girl from Montreal,
Yes, I read her story.
she was mind you, she was in my place a few years ago. So she showed me the film. That's
Did she take a video or a movie? Movie?
video.
The shul is now owned by the city, not by an individual. And there's a possibility that we could get the shul back. What to do with it, we don't know.
What are you going to do with this?
But there is some talk of possibly making it a museum or...
Not by the Poles. Not by the Poles.
well,
If they,
it would be a
you know,
combined effort between the Polish citizens and this group.
They could save a lot of people. Through them, for them, a lot of people got killed. Just from the Poles. Just from the Poles. It was something I told you we buy the eggs from them. One came, Mr. Miller. We never knew that he's a German. We never knew. He came and he was so friendly all the time. He came in the middle of the week, came Tuesday. Once he came in on a Friday. My mother had the candles on. He blew the candles. He says, "You should not do those things. I report you." Across the road, and I told you we had a neighbor. He said like that. He sat outside and he spoke Yiddish. Just like I speak Yiddish. He was brought up between Jews. He said to the German, he was sitting outside on a bench and says, go. There are the Jews. Let them come and clean up my backyard. As I hated the Germans, I think at my heart I had more the Poles. What can I tell you? So that's why I figured, as much as I would go to life to buy my place where I was born.
Well, we're now dealing with a new generation, and hopefully, this generation of Poles and the generation of Germans now in Germany have seen the problems that were caused or can be caused and think a little differently. I realize that there's still hard feelings by a lot of people in Germany, and there's still the neo-Nazis there, but someday maybe this will end.
Let's hope.
So, and